people from small towns where everybody knows everybody. What did someone do that was so embarrassing they had to move away? Our mayor lost $1.3 million to an internet scammer promising a Beyoncé/Justin Timberlake concert. It was so embarrassing oh wait, no, they reelected him, my bad. I'm not even from a small town, but this girl in middle school told everyone she had a brain tumor and did fundraising for a surgery, but one of her best friends asked her parents about it, and they had no clue WTF she was talking about. This was early in the school year, and she didn't last until winter break before her family pulled her out of the district because the bullying was so bad. She was renting out a second home to her son who blew it up, and after investigation, it was found to be a meth lab. Since her son was living there, it didn't need to be listed as a rental, so it was just a second home, so everyone found that address, blew up caused by meth lab, meant that she personally did all that. Even after clearing the air, a lot of people still thought she did drugs, and so much, so that a lot of people would not locally hire her with her drug past. Lady never did drugs in her life. Local weed dealer in our tiny town in the Bible Belt started selling and taking a lot of mushrooms. About a month after his debut of his new product, he took a ridiculous amount in a video on his Snapchat story in order to show how good they were. The morning after that video was released, he started posting 10 videos every minute on his Snapchat story for like 6 hours. It was all ramblings of him being God and better than the scum he was forced to live with on this earth, and how he could save us if we stopped thinking. I don't remember much about the schizo postings, but I do remember the very last video was him in one of the only 2 public access parks here with his junk out peeing on the grass right in the center of the field. After all of that was released, he ended up going to a retail store that I worked at with a handful of my school friends, and he went on a rampage, screaming and stripping himself. I walked past the tantrum at one point and saw him punching the floor over and over, and there was blood from his busted-up hand all over himself and the floor under him. He ended up getting arrested, and the last time I had heard about him, he was in a psychiatric hospital receiving treatment for psilocybin-induced psychosis and mania. It was absolutely insane. Now everyone in town asks me about my shrooms friend from high school, El Mayo. Plenty of crazy stories here. I remember in the 1970s, there was a girl in our town who caught all sorts of flack for getting pregnant at 13. 13, if you can believe it. Why, that little tramp. And by her uncle, no less. That poor man, seduced by that terrible devil child, knew she was a bad seed from the moment. Yeah, you as sick to your stomach as I am yet? That's how the old lady mafia in our town characterized the incident. We never saw her again, but Uncle Pervert was a pillar of the community and was frequently seen around town for years afterwards. I hope his ultimate fate involved Hammer somehow. Much tamer, but I remember when my grade school had us do that DRE program in 6th grade. It was in February, and the first day of the program just happened to be the day they had us decorate envelopes to hang from our desks for the Valentine exchange. A lot of glitter glue had been used, and the envelopes were all spread out on tables and shelves to dry. The officer came in and started his spiel, and at one point went to do the casual sit/lean on one of the shelves and sat right on one of the envelopes, getting glitter glue all over the seat of his pants. We all called him Deputy Sparkle Pants for the entirety of the program. I'm turning 40 this year, and I still remember Deputy Sparkle Pants. Pissed in the biscuit dough at Hardee's. Every small town has a Pisket story, but this one is authentic. His co-workers laughed, and when his mom showed up to order breakfast, he told her what he did as if she would think it was funny. She didn't find it funny at all and literally beat his ass. It made the local paper. Destroyed the whole community. The Hardee's became an Arby's, now it's a bridal shop. The Hardee's became an Arby's is a uniquely American sentence, and one that does convey how serious this situation was. Kid was expelled from every school in town, all 4, and we were his last chance. One day, he did a roundhouse kick to our pregnant teacher's stomach. She never came back, and neither did he. Late 80s. Very nerdy white guy. Super quiet, bowl cut, smart but completely socially inept. Not a jerk, just a nerd. Summer is JR year, visits family for the summer, comes back, well, as a white guy acting like a black guy. I mean, fully dressed as a rapper and talking like one. He even changed his name. Duke E. Fresh. Duke E. Became Dookie in 2 seconds, Dookie fresh. Rough. Went to another HS by Deck, I think. Last I heard, he came out and was finally comfortable with who he is. No longer pretending to be black. Did he not say it out loud once? Even if it wasn't Dookie fresh, the Chuck E. Cheese comparisons would still be there. I grew up in a small town in Georgia. I had a friend in high school that came out as gay. He was essentially forced to leave town for his own safety. So many Christians were so ready to judge and harm someone for just existing. Thankfully, I left too when I graduated high school. I could never go back or let my kids grow up in a place like that. This is not embarrassing, but they were forced to move. Our old neighbor and my wife got into a petty argument about dog poop. To make a long story short, she tried to poison our dog with antifreeze and ended up killing the neighbor's dog on the other side. At the same time, she was cheating on her husband, and he let the police fully aware of what happened. We all packed that courthouse and made her feel horrible. The judge was furious. She moved away shortly after. Only enough the house exploded about a month later from a gas leak. No one was there. Not embarrassing, but back in the early 80s, there were these 2 guys in my 40,000 pop town. One owned a top restaurant and the other the coolest bar. They both did and sold a lot of cocaine, but they were great folks and did plenty for the community. When the feds were snooping around, the local police chief gave them the heads up and suggested they move. So they packed up and headed to Florida. The restaurant guy and his family stayed there the rest of his life. The bar guy eventually moved back to town when his kid was in high school. Our mayor resigned and moved halfway across the country to be with a grown daughter no one knew she had. She'd been elected in June of 2020 in special elections with low turnout and quickly started doing shady stuff like trying to destroy blocks of our historic, touristy downtown to build a new jail, including plotting to circumvent the Historic Preservation Committee. She was, to say the least, not well liked by much of the town. A few years later, 3 new council members got voted in, went to a 4th incumbent councilman, and said they wouldn't vote for the current mayor to be mayor again. Our mayor is elected by council, not by popular vote, but they would vote for him. He happily voted for himself. And the 3 new members quickly cracked the majority that had been trying to implement a lot of stuff the town didn't want. The then mayor somehow found out she wasn't going to be appointed again by her peers and resigned a half hour before a council meeting with no notice to the council or city staff and pretty much left town after that. Town politics have thankfully been pretty boring since then. My parents' church, and that which I attended at the time before I realized that the congregation was comprised of mostly judgmental and generally horrible people that only pretended to welcome and accept me at all, was at the center of a town-wide pop. Less than 5,000. Scandal when their pastor became the subject of an FBI investigation. One of the trustees who served as IT/tech support back in the early days of the internet, and when computers were still rather primitive, had let himself into the church building and into the pastor's office to fix something on the church's computer, from which the pastor conducted the majority of his work communications and the like. The trustee claimed that upon digging into the files, he had found material that made him immediately go to the nearest trash can to vomit. It was at that point that the relevant authorities were contacted and subsequently were in contact with the FBI, who promptly seized the church's computer and the pastor's personal computer while placing him under arrest. The pastor made the cover of the local newspaper and had the nerve to complain about the fact that they put him on blast. My family ran into him at a gas station a few months after his arrest. Why the hell he was out and not on an ankle monitor or something. The secretary of my parents' church had the audacity to call the local newspaper and complain to its editor that he shouldn't have been on the front page, picture and all, like that, and that he was really a good man with personal problems that needed attention. Notably, not denying the allegations against him, nor that he was a grade A pervert. I'm so glad I don't live in that town anymore. We had a girl in high school who went to stay with her sister. Yes, she was pregnant. Her dad was a very outspoken pastor at a local church. The story ripped through town. The horror. Well, she was never allowed to return to our town, but magically the pastor's wife, she must have been 50 at least, had a new baby she pushing in a pram all over town and claimed was hers. Everyone knew. Everyone whispered behind their backs. No one said a word. Pretty messed up when I think about it now. This gal, Heidi Carnes, stole a bunch of money from a charity that was started to help underprivileged children. She was the secretary of it. They found she spent over $20,000 on Lululemon clothes, Starbucks, and other frivolous things. She made her husband and family move from Watford City over to Fargo because of a new job opportunity after she sat a couple weeks in prison. I know there's others that have done crap like this in WC, but that's the latest one. In middle school, a kid got hauled out of class because he had an ounce of weed in his locker on the day the cops brought the drug dogs in for training. We were told in advance they were coming. I hate that. It was just the first step in turning my once good high school into a prison. It literally looks like a prison now. Started with the drug dogs, except they rarely ever found anybody, just pulled them out of class and made a scene because the dogs smelled something. My neighbors across the street invited me over for dinner. I was maybe 5 or 6 years old. They told me to stop hanging out with another neighbor girl that I was really close with. They told me that because she was Jewish, she was going to burn in the lake of fire, and said I would too unless I cut her off. I was a child and felt scared, so I told her I can't be seen hanging out with her, or else we will both burn in the lake of fire. Her parents called my parents outraged. My parents asked me where I heard that kind of talk from, and so I told them it was the neighbors across the street. My parents then warned all of the other neighborhood parents about that family and what they're trying to brainwash other people's children with. The whole neighborhood ostracized them, so they moved away to Texas. After that, the girl I hung out with wasn't allowed to hang out with me anymore. I still feel horrible about it, and I resent those neighbors for tricking me, a 5 or 6-year-old, into intimidating my Jewish neighbors. I was just a kid. I guess it's way worse than just embarrassing, though. This actually just happened over the last 3 weeks. I teach at a rural high school of 400 students in the middle of a tiny town. 3 weeks ago, toward the end of class, a boy got up to throw a drink bottle in the trash. As he was walking back to his seat, he stopped to fart directly onto a girl. He must have tried too hard or something because he shit his pants instead. The smell was bloody revolting. I sent him to the nurse, since her office has spare clothes and a small shower, and I took the rest of the students into the hall. I found out today that the boy has transferred to a district about 30 miles away. I don't know that the defecation incident was the cause, but it wouldn't surprise me. This kid still had 3 years of public school to go, and the students can be absolutely merciless about things like that. Small town of 10K people in the 80s when absolutely nobody had any home security cameras. Like any town, there were thefts and break-ins. What people almost didn't figure out was that the things they thought they lost were actually stolen from them. After the fact, people learned that it was an all-too-common experience to suddenly find yourself missing a valuable piece of jewelry. No sign of break-in, but the diamond ring was just not where you were sure you left it. It was always the type of heirloom item that wasn't worn every day. It was just kept put away somewhere in a little bag or box. Most people suspected their friends, family members, children, or spouses, because who else would even know about the existence of this item? The local insurance agent, where you took out a home insurance rider to cover the diamonds. This guy, call him Steven, would help you make sure that your family valuable was insured. Then, a couple years later, when you made an appointment to stop in and review your life insurance policy, he would be late to the appointment. Once in a while, he got caught knocking on front doors at the appointment time, or popping his head inside the unlocked door to see if you were at home. His cover story for that was, "Oh, I thought we agreed to meet at your house." But typically, while you were in his office, waiting for him to show up, he was in your house stealing from you. After his jail term, he moved away. When I was a kid, 3 business owners went to Vegas from our small farm town in Nebraska. They all ended up getting divorced that year. 2 of them sold their businesses and houses and left town. I delivered the newspaper to one of them, although of course I never talked to him about any of that dubious affair. And the third supposedly mortgaged his house and business to a local bank, but stayed. The rumor was they played high-stakes poker and tried to cover for each other as things went downhill until they had all gambled everything they could get the title to. Completely separate, maybe 10 years later, the guy who owned the tire store rode out to Vegas with his wife on his motorcycle, and when they came home, they were driving a new Porsche. He's a nice guy. It was a long time ago now, but I remember his silver Porsche as he always drove it to the tire store when he was working. Wealthy lady comes home to her wealthy vacation town in her wealthy third vacation house that sits empty 9 months out of the year, only to find a TURD floating in her toilet, face screaming in fear. She calls the police, stating there was a predator in her home. Dear God, please come help. There was an investigation. I'm talking proper CSI dudes with big rubber gloves and everything. Lab tested, and it was her turd. Where I'm from, that story hit the paper like WV3. Some kids from our high school even grew up to write a book sold in all the tourist shops that was just silly excerpt from our police blotter. She was page number 1. Probably made plenty off the house sale, though, so